In today's episode, we are going to look at 6 dumb deaths of ordinary people ever recorded. From a man trying to prove a high-rise window was unbreakable to a creator testing if a book could stop a bullet in a stunt that ended in the most brutal way possible. It was April 8th, 2018, in a modern commercial district of downtown Seattle. A mild spring morning had settled over the area, with sunlight reflecting off rows of newly constructed office buildings. Inside a mid-rise professional complex, activity moved at a measured pace as employees attended meetings and visitors were escorted through reception areas. Zach Monoma, 29, worked as a senior associate at a consulting firm that specialized in regulatory compliance and corporate risk assessment. He was known for his clear communication style and confidence when presenting complex ideas to clients and trainees. As part of his role, Zach frequently participated in orientation sessions for visiting interns and university students, offering practical examples meant to illustrate abstract concepts like liability, safety standards, and professional responsibility. On the morning of April 8th, a small group of students had been invited to observe a training seminar at the firm's offices. The session was held in a large conference room on an upper floor, featuring expansive floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the surrounding streets and neighboring buildings. The windows were set into slim metal frames and designed to maximize natural light, a selling point emphasized when the building was constructed several years earlier. Zach had prepared remarks that focused on risk evaluation and assumptions people make about safety in professional environments. As the discussion progressed, attention turned briefly to building design and modern materials. Zach referenced the strength of contemporary architectural glass, explaining that it was engineered to withstand significant force without shattering. Wanting to make the concept more tangible, Zach moved toward one of the windows. He explained that the glass panels were impact-resistant and commonly used in high-rise construction. The students watched as he placed his hands against the glass and leaned forward slightly, applying modest pressure. The panel did not flex or crack, reinforcing his point. Several of the students later said they assumed the demonstration was safe because of how confidently he explained the material. Encouraged by the response, Zach increased the pressure, shifting more of his body weight forward to demonstrate what he believed was a wide margin of safety. The glass remained intact. However, the frame securing the panel to the surrounding structure was not designed to support sustained lateral force from a concentrated load. Without warning, the fasteners anchoring the frame gave way. The glass itself did not break, but the entire window assembly detached from its mounting. Zach, already leaning into the panel, was unable to recover his balance as the frame moved outward. He fell with the window through the opening. The fall ended several stories below on a paved service area adjacent to the building. Emergency services were called immediately, and responders arrived within minutes. Zach was pronounced deceased at the scene. The students were escorted from the building by staff, many of them visibly shaken by how quickly the incident had unfolded. A subsequent investigation by building inspectors and safety officials focused on the window assembly and its mounting system. The report concluded that the glass met all impact resistance standards, but the frame was designed to withstand wind pressure, not direct human force. No structural defects or maintenance failures were found. The coroner ruled the cause of death as blunt force trauma from a fall, with toxicology negative and no evidence of reckless intent. In response, the firm revised its safety policies, banning physical demonstrations involving architectural features and installing warning signage near large windows. The company later partnered with a local university to fund safety awareness workshops, emphasizing how assumptions about safety can lead to unintended consequences. It was May 2021, late in the afternoon, on a quiet suburban street on the outskirts of Dallas, Texas. Long shadows stretched across neatly trimmed lawns as a white passenger van sat at the end of a cul-de-sac. 6 staff members climbed aboard for a short drive to a nearby park, expecting nothing more than an easy trip through the neighborhood. Tyrone Lanes, 42, had been a professional driver for more than 10 years. Known among co-workers for his calm demeanor, he took pride in following safety routines to the letter. That morning, he completed a full pre-trip inspection, checking tires, mirrors, seat positions, and fluid levels. Before starting the engine, he confirmed that every passenger was buckled in. Experience had taught him that small details prevented big problems. Moments later, the van eased away from the curb and rolled toward the first stop sign at the end of the block. As the vehicle turned onto the narrow street, Tyrone pressed the brake pedal to slow. Nothing happened. Confused, he tried again. The pedal sank lower than expected, offering almost no resistance. He pumped it twice, then shifted gears, but the slowing force never came. The van continued forward, gathering speed as a slight downhill curve appeared ahead. Panic set in. Parked cars lined both sides of the road, and the lane narrowed toward a bend. With only seconds to react, Tyrone made a sudden decision. He unbuckled his seatbelt, pulled the door open, and leapt from the moving van, hoping to escape before it struck something. His body hit the pavement hard. Witnesses later said he tumbled once before coming to rest near the curb. Later, medical examination would determine that the impact caused severe blunt force trauma to his head, leading to rapid loss of consciousness and death. Inside the van, chaos erupted. With the driver gone, the vehicle rolled forward without control. A middle-aged employee seated near the front lunged toward the steering wheel and managed to grab it. Passengers attempted to give instructions as everyone scrambled to respond. The van swerved around a parked car, clipped a mailbox, and drifted toward the curb. Using steady hands, the employee guided the van into a wide driveway and finally brought it to a stop. The passengers sat in stunned silence. No one inside the vehicle had been physically injured, though several were shaking uncontrollably. A call was placed to 911 within moments. Emergency responders arrived to find Tyrone unresponsive on the pavement. He was pronounced dead at the scene, while paramedics evaluated the passengers for minor injuries and severe shock. A formal investigation later found that the van's braking system had failed after a sudden hydraulic rupture caused a rapid loss of pressure. While the mechanical failure created the emergency, officials noted that remaining inside the vehicle would likely have allowed safer control using steering and remaining braking systems. The coroner ruled the cause of death as blunt force trauma from striking the pavement. Toxicology tests were negative, and the death was classified as accidental. In the weeks that followed, the program revised its transportation policies, adding redundant brake inspections, emergency response training, and stricter trip planning procedures. A memorial fund was established in Tyrone's name to support advanced driver safety courses. Colleagues later said the tragedy was a painful reminder of how panic, even in experienced hands, can turn a survivable emergency into a fatal mistake. It was July 14th, 2016, in the backyard of a suburban home outside Kansas City, Missouri. Folding tables had been arranged across the lawn for a summer block party, and a crowd of neighbors gathered around a large rectangular block of ice resting on a wooden stand. Music played from portable speakers. Drinks were passed between guests, and several phones were already raised, recording what was about to happen. John Paulson, 38, worked as a warehouse supervisor and was known among friends for enjoying tools, home projects, and attention-grabbing stunts. He had no formal training in sculpture, but earlier that afternoon, he announced he would carve an ice sculpture for the party. Instead of using traditional carving tools, he brought out a gasoline-powered chainsaw, explaining that it would be faster and more impressive. The chainsaw had been designed for cutting wood, not ice. John wore no gloves, no face shield, and no protective apron. He stood in shorts and sneakers, positioning himself close to the block while several guests stepped back to give him room. A few people later said they felt uneasy, but assumed he knew what he was doing. John pulled the starter cord, and the chainsaw roared to life. He placed the spinning chain against the front edge of the ice, sending a spray of chips and meltwater across the grass. The crowd laughed and cheered as he traced shallow cuts into the the surface, trying to shape the block freehand. As the blade moved deeper, water pooled beneath the stand, turning the grass slick. The surface of the ice became uneven, forcing John to adjust his grip and angle. Witnesses later said the saw appeared to hesitate briefly as the chain bound against a harder ridge inside the block. Without warning, the chain caught. The saw kicked back violently, snapping upward and sideways toward his body. John instinctively tried to pull away, but the sudden force threw his balance off. His right foot slipped on the wet grass, and the chainsaw swung downward across his upper thigh. The spinning chain tore through muscle and soft tissue before the engine stalled. John collapsed immediately, dropping the saw as blood spread rapidly across the lawn. Several guests rushed forward, pressing towels and clothing against the wound, while others called 911. The bleeding was severe and continuous. Attempts to slow it were ineffective, and within minutes, John became pale and unresponsive. Paramedics arrived to find massive blood loss from a deep laceration to the upper leg. Despite emergency treatment and rapid transport, he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival at the hospital. The medical examiner listed the cause of death as exsanguination due to a chainsaw laceration to the femoral region. Toxicology tests were negative for alcohol and drugs. Investigators found no mechanical defect in the chainsaw, concluding that the accident resulted from improper tool use, lack of protective equipment, and loss of footing on a wet surface. Safety officials later issued warnings reminding the public that chainsaws are not designed for carving or entertainment demonstrations, and that kickback injuries remain one of the most common causes of fatal chainsaw accidents. The unfinished block of ice melted overnight, leaving only wet grass and splintered wood where the sculpture was meant to stand. It was November 22, 2014, at a subway station in Brooklyn, New York. Fluorescent lights reflected off the platform tiles, while the third rail hummed with roughly 600 volts just 4 feet below the edge. The evening rush had thinned to scattered commuters, most absorbed in their phones. Johan Ocampo, a 21-year-old Brooklyn college student, had been working part-time at an electronics repair shop. Friends described him as meticulous and methodical, especially when handling smartphones, which contained his personal, academic, and social information. This evening, he had been video chatting with his girlfriend while returning from a late shift and had positioned himself near the platform edge. He understood that the third rail carried a lethal charge, but did not anticipate that retrieving a dropped device would put him in direct contact with it. At approximately 11:34 p.m., Johan's phone slipped from his hands and fell onto the tracks below the platform. He stepped onto the track bed in an attempt to retrieve the device. Several commuters later said they assumed he would climb back up. Immediately, the track surface was uneven, with wooden ties, gravel, and debris accumulated from daily operations, creating a challenging and unstable footing. The platform edge, marked with a yellow warning line, was only a few feet from the energized third rail, which ran parallel to the tracks. Other commuters were present on the platform, but none entered the track area or attempted to assist. Johan moved cautiously toward the phone, which had landed functional and screen lit, while balancing himself on the ballast between the rails. As he reached the phone, he crouched to pick it up, adjusting his footing on the uneven surface. At that moment, his left hand made contact with the third rail, which carried high voltage direct current. The electrical current passed through his body immediately, causing involuntary muscle contractions that prevented him from lifting his hand or moving away from the rail. The contact disrupted normal motor function, leaving him effectively incapacitated within seconds. Nearby transit personnel observed the event through surveillance and responded quickly, cutting power to the section of track to prevent further hazard. Investigators later determined that the electrical current was sufficient to cause immediate neuromuscular paralysis and severe disruption of normal muscle and heart function, leaving little opportunity for self-rescue. During the sequence, Johan's body remained in contact with the energized rail for the duration of the exposure. Surveillance footage and witness statements showed that he remained in contact with the energized rail for several seconds, while the surrounding environment, gravel, ballast, and proximity to the platform edge limited his ability to move away. The sequence of events from stepping onto the tracks to incapacitation occurred in a matter of seconds, emphasizing how quickly third-rail contact can become fatal. Emergency responders were dispatched immediately after power was cut, but the brief window for intervention had already passed, making effective intervention unlikely before help could arrive. Emergency responders arrived at 11:41 p.m. and found Johann unresponsive on the tracks. He was transported to a nearby hospital where he was pronounced dead shortly after midnight. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as electrocution with secondary cardiac arrest, noting burns consistent with third-rail contact. Investigators concluded that stepping onto the tracks and contacting the energized rail left almost no opportunity for self-rescue, and the rapid sequence allowed little time for effective intervention. Afterward, the city's transit authority increased safety announcements and installed additional warning signs about third-rail hazards. Johann's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit, which was dismissed after courts ruled the incident constituted criminal trespass. A memorial scholarship was later established in his name. It was August 12, 2017, in a quiet suburban backyard on the outskirts of a Midwestern city. Folding chairs were set along the grass, and nearly 30 people stood gathered behind a loose line of tripods and smartphones, all aimed toward a wooden table in the center of the yard. On the table rested several hardcover books, stacked beside a single thick volume chosen for the afternoon's experiment. Daniel Mercer, 35, was an online content creator who built a small following by testing viral claims and internet myths. His videos often mixed basic science with spectacle, and he had begun looking for stunts that would draw more attention. In the weeks before that afternoon, he announced he would attempt to prove that a thick hardcover book could stop a bullet. Friends later said Daniel seemed confident from the start. He told the crowd the book was heavy, the shot would be controlled, and everyone would stand well back. A close friend agreed to handle the firearm, while Daniel planned to hold the book against his chest and demonstrate its protective strength. Several people later admitted they felt uneasy, but no one objected. Because Daniel spoke calmly and acted certain, most assumed the idea must be safer than it sounded. Shortly after 5 p.m., the cameras began recording. Daniel stepped into position and lifted the book with both hands, pressing it flat against the center of his chest. He stood only a few feet from the muzzle, aligning the cover so it faced the barrel directly. The yard fell quiet as final adjustments were made. No protective barrier stood between him and the gun. Someone counted down. When the shot was fired, the bullet struck the middle of the book and tore through the pages instantly. Paper burst outward in a cloud of fragments as the binding split apart. The round passed through the back cover without slowing and entered Daniel's chest. The impact knocked him backward onto the grass. For a moment, no one moved. Then several people screamed as blood spread across his shirt. A few rushed forward, while others stood frozen, staring at the torn book lying beside him. Someone shouted to call an ambulance. The cameras continued recording as confusion and panic spread through the yard. Daniel did not attempt to sit up or speak. Emergency calls were placed within seconds. When paramedics arrived, they found him unresponsive and showing no signs of breathing. Despite brief life-saving efforts, he was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators later confirmed that a hardcover book offered no meaningful resistance against the type of round that had been fired. Ballistics testing showed the bullet passed through the pages with minimal loss of energy. The firearm functioned normally, and toxicology tests showed no drugs or alcohol involved. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death a gunshot wound to the chest and classified the incident as an accidental death caused by reckless judgment. Authorities reviewed the case, and the shooter faced charges related to negligent firearm use. The video was never released, and Daniel's channel disappeared from the internet within days. Friends later said he had wanted to prove a simple myth on camera. Instead, the experiment became a permanent reminder that some ideas are not just wrong, they are deadly. It was June 18th, 2013, in a suburban backyard in Atlanta. A 14-foot trampoline stretched taut over steel springs with the purchased safety net and padding still unopened in the garage. The yard was quiet, except for a few classmates celebrating the end of the school year Jonas Inares, 17, was a high school soccer player known for pushing physical limits. He frequently attempted acrobatic moves on the family trampoline without formal training, relying on self-taught techniques and YouTube tutorials. That afternoon, he was joined by 4 classmates who had been taking turns performing jumps and simple tricks. The celebratory atmosphere and encouragement from friends prompted Jonas to attempt a backflip he had never successfully completed. That afternoon, Jonas positioned himself in the center of the trampoline to attempt his most ambitious backflip yet. He built momentum with several controlled jumps, each bounce carrying him higher as the springs stretched and snapped back beneath his weight. His friends gathered along the perimeter, some cheering, one classmate lifting a phone to record. Several later said they assumed he would land safely because he had been jumping cleanly just moments earlier. As he launched upward, Jonas tucked his arms tightly and angled his chin down, initiating the rotation he intended to complete before landing upright. For an instant, the movement appeared smooth, but midway through the flip, his body rotated faster than expected. Instead of completing a single rotation, he over-rotated, passing nearly 1.5 turns. As he descended, he tried to throw his arms outward and straighten his neck to recover, but the speed of rotation and the sudden drop left no time to correct. He struck the trampoline head first. His neck flexed sharply forward as his torso continued rotating backward. The elastic surface rebounded unevenly beneath him, forcing his head and shoulders downward again and concentrating the impact along his cervical spine rather than absorbing it. The impact caused a catastrophic injury to Jonas's upper cervical spine, leaving him paralyzed and unable to breathe on his own. Witnesses saw his movement stop immediately, and attempts to assist his breathing were ineffective. Paramedics arrived at 3:53 p.m. and transported him to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 4:31 p.m. Medical examination confirmed respiratory failure from a high cervical spinal cord injury with no drugs or alcohol involved. A classmate's phone video captured the over-rotation and point of impact and was later submitted as evidence before being deleted. Investigators cited the lack of safety equipment and the untrained backflip as contributing factors, warning that unsupervised trampoline tricks remain a leading cause of fatal spinal injuries. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.